Changing a country isn't easy, but change is inevitable. And the choices we make today will shape our country for generations to come. That's why we've published our first book from Australia Institute Press. What's the Big Idea offers 32 ideas for a better Australia, from leading thinkers such as Bob Brown, Sally McManus, Dr. Emma Shortis, and Professor Brian Schmidt. The essays are a roadmap and a reminder that the solutions exist. Australia just needs the courage to implement them. Visit australiainstitute.org.au or follow the link in the show notes to order your copy of What's the Big Idea today.
Hello and welcome to Dollars and Cents, the Australian Institute podcast where we're talking about just what the hell is going on in the economy. I'm Elinor Johnston-Leake, the senior content producer here at the Australian Institute, and as always, I'm talking to our chief economist, Greg Jericho. Hello, Greg.
Hi, Elinor, but not as always. Welcome back
as
from
always,
your sojourn away in the Pacific.
Thank you. It was a very, very cool experience, but I'm glad to be back.
And we're going to be seeing the evidence of what you did soon.
Coming soon. Stay tuned.
I have seen some snippets of photos, and my God, it's incredible. But the story is extremely important over there in Tuvalu. So can't wait to see.
And if you wanted to hear a bit more about that before the final product comes out, you can go listen to the episode of Follow the Money I just did with Stephen Long and listen to some young climate activists from Tuvalu and their stories about what's happening there. So, Greg, I'm going to get Angus to insert some air horns here. GDP figures just came out. It's your favourite time of the year. Of the quarter.
I have 4 favourite times of the year. Yes, GDP out.
Yes. The last GDP figures of 2024 came out. Greg, was the end of 2024 just as crappy as the rest of it?
Actually, no. It was a little bit better. I mean, one of the things I like about the last quarter of each year is it allows you to look at things in a couple of different ways. The normal way where we look at the quarterly changes and things. But you're also able to kind of do what happened in the entire year. And 2024, as you rightly sort of point out, kind of sucked. It was the growth of the economy throughout the entire year compared to what happened in the entire year of 2023. The growth there was one of the worst calendar years in basically Australia's recorded economic history. Sort of going back to 1960, it was in sort of the bottom 7 or 8 years. And if you take out 2020, which of course was the pandemic, so kind of just a bit abnormal, it was the worst year of economic growth since 1990, which was a recession, one of the worst recessions that Australia's ever had. So not good when you're saying things, it's the worst since then. So not great overall, but actually at least the December quarter, the end of 2020, showed some signs of improvement. I think the big phrase is turning the corner. We've turned the corner.
Australia's per capita recession is over.
Growth is picking up in the Australian economy, and the Australian economy has turned a corner.
After 7 consecutive quarters of falling gross domestic product divided by population, it's finally gone up 0.1%.
Jim Chalmers says things are on the improve, but households are paying a lot higher interest rates. Things at the supermarket cost more, insurance and rents have all gone up. Just how voters are feeling is the big question as we head into the federal election.
So what were the numbers?
I think the big news is that, and our listeners will know we've been talking for a very long time, like more than 2 years, about how GDP per capita has been going backwards. Well, finally, in the last 3 months of last year, GDP per capita rose. Woo! So we are no longer in that sort of notional sort of thing of a GDP per capita recession, which is kind of a made-up thing anyway. But no, it didn't fall. GDP per capita rose by, wait for it, 0.1%.
Still counts.
Hopefully, in 3 months' time, they don't revise the number down. But up by 0.1%. So the Good news, though, about that is it wasn't because, we had a drop-off in population growth or something like that. It was just that the actual growth overall was good enough because GDP itself, the total economy, went up by 0.6% in the December quarter, which, look, is not wonderful but not terrible. If we had 4 quarters of that, it would still be an annual growth of 2.4%, which is, again, a bit below average, but at least kind of chugging along nicely. So that was good. But as I say, the overall year has been terrible. So if you look at the annual growth, it was just 1.3%, which, as I say, that's about sort of half what you'd be wanting. Not really good, but turn corner, things are on the improve.
Yeah. So, Greg, previously on the pod, you mentioned population growth. We've talked before about how population growth was the only thing that has been keeping the economy growing. Is that still the case, or we've got something else?
No, not really. I mean, there were really 3 things that powered the economy in the last 3 months of 2024, and that was household spending. There was a nice little improvement in household spending. We actually were going out and spending some money. And the good news there as well, it was pretty broad-based. It was across a lot of areas. It wasn't like, we were just paying a lot more bills and everything. There was actually a nice little bump in dining out, nice little bump in household goods. There were a few, things like health expenditure did rise a fair bit. So you might think that's not exactly a great sign. But generally across most things, at least in the last 3 months, there was a bit of an increase.
Yeah.
So that was good, although I'll just come back to that in a sec. The other thing, trade, really good sort of numbers on the export side of things. There were a couple aspects there that were really big. One was chickpeas, of all things.
Sure.
Because Australia is one, we're not only a big exporter of LNG, we're also a big exporter of chickpeas. And if there's one cuisine that really likes chickpeas, Indian loves it. And there had been some tariffs against our chickpea exports into India. They were dropped, and so there was a nice little boost of chickpea exports
Chana masala driven
to India. So that's great. And the other thing was, because our dollar is pretty low, in the last 3 months of the year, we had a nice uptick in tourism especially from Americans coming, probably just to flee the country at the end of last year. They came to Australia, and it's always a little bit counterintuitive, but tourism coming into Australia is counted as an export because they're basically bringing their money from overseas and spending it here in much the same way as if we sold something to Americans, they give us money. It's the same thing. So
we're exporting good vibes and good holidays, I guess.
So they were 2 things. And the other thing was government spending. Government spending was also pretty strong in the last bit of 2024, had been strong all throughout. So they were the 3 main drivers, which, look, is kind of good, but it means what are we missing there? A lot of the private sector in, a lot of investment was not great. Housing construction was not great. Take out sort of the uptick in household spending, private sector's still pretty weak.
And the uptick in household spending, is that sort of explained by it being the end of the year, people are sort of spending more because it's the holidays, or is that not as much of a...
No, more it's the fact that we weren't really spending much beforehand.
Yeah.
So the overall spending is still really low. It was just we were coming off such a poor period that any sort of slight increase looked really good.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of like, great to see and households, as I've said in the past, kind of should be the big driver of the economy because it makes up about half of the entire economy. Everything you and I and everyone out there listening spends, whether it's in the shops or in bills or in education, health, all of that, that makes up about 50 to 55% of the economy. So it should make up a big amount of our growth. The problem is it hasn't been, at least in the last 3 months. There was that kind of a bit of a recovery. Wage growth was getting good. We weren't having the interest rate rises anymore, so maybe that had a bit of an impact where people were feeling like, okay, I'm not getting slapped in the face anymore by the Reserve Bank. That combined with the fact it was coming off a low base made it look good. But if you kind of look at the annual growth figures, not good at all. So as I
Yeah.
say, turned a corner, but there's still a fair way to go.
Yeah. And we did get a rate cut recently, which I'm sure you were very excited about. So do you think that's going to give us another corner to turn, or?
Look, hopefully.
Yeah.
But what I think, and the important thing is these figures, as I say, because they cover the last 3 months of 2024, don't include the rate cut.
No.
So they were pretty crap. As I was saying, 1.3% annual growth, household spending, a little bit better, but, not great. It all kind of has me thinking, what was the Reserve Bank doing in November or December that they were thinking, oh, we don't need to raise rates, cut rates now. We can wait. It's like, well, the economy was struggling, and it would have been good if you had cut rates then. That would have kind of helped the momentum out of the real doldrums that we'd been in because of the rate rises. A rate cut at the end of last year really would have given us some good impetus. Now it's kind of like they've come in a bit late. I think there's nothing in these figures that would have had the Reserve Bank thinking, oh, I'm not sure if we should have cut rates in February. And if anything, I think that you look at these and go, this is still an economy that needs help, and households still need help. And I reckon they should be looking at these figures and going, actually, we should cut rates in April. I don't think
in
they
April
will.
was the next one.
Yeah, April Fool's Day is the next
Great.
Reserve Bank meeting, and I think they should cut rates. I don't think they will. The market doesn't think they will. But again, these figures just show private sector terrible.
Yeah.
There's really no great investment. The only real sort of private sector investment that we saw, and this was also included a little bit with the exports, is a thing called intellectual property products, which is a bit of pharmaceutical stuff. We were getting some good IP there and everything, but it's kind of like, yeah, that's great, but it's not kind of building something that is going to generate lots of jobs and lots of activity, and in that sort of sense that you normally see with, say, non-housing construction, where are we out there building new roads, new rail? Are we building new houses? It wasn't really that kind of investment that we're seeing. So clearly the private sector is still struggling a bit, and households getting better, but basically all we were seeing is, oh, thanks, you're no longer hurting us. Maybe in we would hope in the next figures that come out in the next 3 months, we'll see some more growth there. But I think, as I say, a long way to go to recover. And what these figures also showed is, again, that half of the sort of decline in household disposable income since March 2022 has come from higher mortgage rates. If you want to improve living standards, start helping out on the mortgage rates thing.
The truth is, Australians continue to face a very tough set of circumstances.
Providing cost of living relief has been a big part of the first 3 budgets, and if we can afford it, it will be part of the 4th budget as well.
These GDP figures come out with some more figures about living standards, don't they? What can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, it's always that quirky thing with the national accounts. They don't have a nice living standards figure. You kind of have to construct it yourself. And basically what we're talking about is household disposable income per capita. Gee, there's a catchy title. Basically, it's how much income do you have once you've paid your mortgages and all your taxes, because we treat mortgages in a sense like taxes because you can't avoid them. So you get your income, and what are the things you have to pay, and what you're left over is your disposable income. And what we also do then is we sort of account for inflation. So has it gone up or gone down faster than inflation? And then we basically do a per capita divided by everyone in the country to kind of get an individual sense. And what we've certainly seen over the past 3 years is a big fall in that. And the opposition certainly has been going on about this a lot, talking about a record fall in living standards. They've been comparing it to other nations in the OECD who haven't had the same fall as we had.
Yeah.
And the main reason is, and I've certainly written about this as well, because it is kind of unprecedented. The main reason for that fall is kind of 2 things. One, as I say, big hikes in mortgages, and also the fact that inflation has gone up faster than our wages. So that's been a big impact. But also Australia, unlike a lot of other countries in the OECD, amongst those advanced countries, in the past 2 years has had a big influx of migrants. And that has had a major impact. But the problem is it makes it look like our living standards have fallen, but maybe they really haven't. Because remember, when we do per capita, it's just an average. So let's say you've got 10 people in a room all on $100,000 a year. So their average disposable income is $100,000.
Yeah.
And then let's say 3 foreign students enter the room whose income each is $30,000. Suddenly the average income of that room has fallen, but no one's actually worse off.
Yeah.
It's just that certainly a big proportion of the migrants who have flooded back into Australia are foreign students because during the pandemic we completely shut it off.
Yeah,
So there was kind of this build-up of, oh God, we've got migrants who wanted to come, couldn't come. Now we're sort of rebalancing that, but in that rebalance, kind of we had a real surge of migrants. So it kind of has affected the figures. That's not to say things are all hunky-dory, because even if you say, well, let's not even worry about accounting for population growth, household disposable income in total has gone up, but it kind of hasn't gone up by as much as you would have thought. And that's because, one, wages have taken a hit, and also mortgage payments have gone up. So it's a case of you need to sort of have a little bit of context there. That's not going to help Labor.
No,
the Libs are still going to go on about
hard to
it, but
grasp in
it
elections.
is something just to bear in mind when you look at these things. You go, oh, our living standards are falling. And go, well, are you worse off? Probably a little bit, maybe because your wage hasn't kept up with inflation, but probably not because our population has grown, because someone coming in who's a student doesn't affect you, but it does affect the overall figures.
So things are slightly looking up for Australia, but across the Pacific Ocean.
Were you going to say across the ditch?
No, across the Pacific Ocean, the US is, let's just say not looking up in the economy.
We're turning a corner to get things better. America look like they are in the process of turning a corner off a cliff.
Yeah, a nosedive maybe. Yeah.
This week, the Federal Reserve in Atlanta, America has got it has got Federal Reserves, which is their central bank, but they've basically got them in each state pretty much. And the Federal Reserve in Atlanta does a regular report looking at what it expects America's GDP to be in the next quarter and so on, what's happening. And, they were sort of thinking that, there might be some okay growth. It might be a bit flat or something. Their most recent update has them now suggesting that America's economy in the first quarter of this year is going to decline in an annual basis of 3.2%. So shrink 3.2% basically, which is, that's recession town, baby.
Yeah.
And it is really dire, and it is seriously off a cliff. Can you
just describe for the listeners the graph that they put out?
Yeah, they've basically got a nice little graph that, again, has it sort of going along their estimates in January of about, it'll grow at about 3%, then into February, 2.5%, 2%, and then their last one went from 2% growth to minus 3.2, and it was just like, that looks really like a cliff.
Yep.
And you might think, hang on, what the hell is going on in America?
Well, you might if you lived under a rock, I think.
What do you think's going on in America?
What do I think?
Yeah.
Just absolute nonsense.
Yeah. And
Donald Trump and Elon Musk is going on.
Donald Trump and Elon Musk combined together for that beautiful synergy of taking the economy off a cliff, because what they're calculating there is the impact of two things: the tariffs, which clearly we've talked about ad nauseum, and Follow the Money and all our podcasts and everything, because we know tariffs are actually a tax on your own citizens, so that and I was seeing some reports this week. There was a great report on Fox News in America where I think the host was trying to get some good news about it. They crossed to this reporter at a car dealership, and he was pointing to a Dodge SUV going, well, this goes for 80,000. Tomorrow it'll be 100,000. And he's going, so I don't think they're going to be selling any tomorrow. And went back to the host, and the host was kind of like, okay, you're giving me nothing here. I can't praise Trump after that. So that's what they're calculating, because Trump has basically gone through with his threat of raising tariffs on Canada and Mexico, and Canada and Mexico going, well, we can play at that game as well. Ontario shutting off electricity exports to America, which is kind of important for the economy. So we got that happening. And as well, Musk has been let loose to just go insane, slashing and burning everything he can get his hands on in the public sector in America. And as we've just been talking about with our economy, the public sector spending is important for keeping the economy growing.
Yeah, the sort of tech approach of move fast and break things.
Yeah.
Actually, in the public sector,
it ain't good.
No.
And it ain't good for overall economy, because you're not just talking about, we're going to sack everyone in the kind of the weather bureaus over there, which who do all the modeling, not only for climate change, but help us with our modeling, the Bureau of Meteorology here, for things like cyclones.
Topical.
So, yeah, we'll sack all of those and all the air traffic controllers and things like that. And it's not just sacking, and cutting all the foreign aid, but it's also sacking people who are doing a lot of services, public services, that actually produce economic growth, because if they don't do it, no one else is doing this. It's not like the private sector is going, oh, yeah, I really want to do this non-profitable thing, that the reason why the public service does it is because it's not profitable. And also they've been very, shall we say, loose with how they are cutting benefits and money going out into the economy. This is to veterans, Social Security, all of these things where they are spreading a massive line. Donald Trump said this in his State of the Union address this week.
This is just the beginning. The Government Accountability Office, a federal government office, has estimated annual fraud of over $500 billion in our nation, and we are working very hard to stop it. We're going to.
Talking about, people on Social Security, it's fraud, they're actually dead, they're not getting it, and it's complete bullshit. But that has the impact of massively cutting the economy, because you're cutting a massive part of the economy. And as a result, the economy goes into freefall. And what this also means is it's not just because you're denying that public sector, especially in really poor areas, which is a lot of the areas that for some reason love Trump.
A lot of red states, yeah.
Red states, as we call them. Okay, if you're not getting your checks or you're not getting that service, that means you're not able to spend in shops or do things in the private sector. And so it has a massive steamrolling effect, and we end up with minus 3.2% growth. The economy is shrinking. So it is not only dangerous, it is dangerous to people's health when you're doing things like, we don't need the Center for Disease Control. They can take a break because it's not like there's any bird flus or anything going around America. Let's stop all of that. So it's not only dangerous for people's health and lives, but it's terrible for the economy, such that now, because this figure has come out, some of the Trump cabinet and people, his advisors, are starting to say, well, maybe we shouldn't count government spending and investment in the GDP figures. Let's just not
stop
count
the count.
them. Yeah, literally stop the count. I mean, it seriously is. It's like, GDP is going to go backwards because government spending has gone down. Well, let's just not count government spending.
Oh, God.
It's so insane at all levels. And the thing is, as we saw with these GDP figures, you already can kind of take out government spending and see what's happening in the private sector. And as I said, when I took out trade, when I took out government spending, and when I took out households, you can see, private sector not doing so good. So you can already do that. But what they're doing is not saying that. They're saying, let's not count government spending at all. And it just sort of goes to the whole thing of, that their approach of, we don't like climate change. Well, let's sack all the climate change scientists who are measuring temperatures, because if we don't measure it, it doesn't exist.
Yep.
The problem is with the economy is even if we didn't measure anything, even if we didn't measure GDP or even didn't measure unemployment, people know whether or not they got a job. People know whether or not it costs more today than it did a month ago to buy stuff. People know whether or not they got their check from Veterans Affairs or not. So even if they stop counting it, it's not going to stop the fact that people are going to feel the effects. And it's why Republicans now are stopping having town hall meetings, because people are standing up and going, where the hell's my bloody check, mate?
Yeah.
and they're going, I thought you were only going to hurt those people, those bad people. I didn't think you were going to hurt me.
Yep.
And there's a real, fuck around and find out kind of. A lot of leopards are eating faces right now. And, but what is kind of good for us in a sort of a
when you say us, who?
When it's good for us Australians,
okay.
I think, and even for, I think, the Australia Institute, in what our research is often about, is showing the vitality and importance of the public sector and government spending, and the fact that governments actually do play a key role and should play a key role, is that we certainly do in the run-up to this election. There is going to be a big debate over public spending. We know the Liberal Party is talking about 36,000 extra public servants who I think Peter Dutton has said, that hasn't helped you at all. And it's like, really? Maybe it has.
I think it probably has.
And it's a case of saying you're going to go down the austerity path sounds nice, but as we can see live in America, it has massive impacts. You can't just cut all these people and expect everything to be hunky-dory.
Yeah. Could you just define what austerity is?
Yeah. So if they're going down the austerity path, which is basically we have to cut back on government spending.
Yep.
We have to be austere, like in, when you're got a household budget, we got to watch what we're spending, because when the government starts doing that, what it really means, cutting back on services, cutting back on payments. You look what's happening around Brisbane and southeast Queensland right now. No one is going around looking, please, private sector, hope you'll help us here. No, it's government spending, government services. In the cleanup, it's going to be government assistance. It's going to be government services that are going to help people who have been, whether there's flooding, and hopefully it's not too bad, but certainly the signs are not good. So it's a case of, we're seeing in America literally that very thing. They're cutting back on the agency that covers disasters in America, that does that type of thing. And it's like, on the books, it might look like you've saved some money, but actually what you've done is taken away vital services. And if you keep going and try and sack all these public servants who are actually delivering these services, maybe there's a few, maybe there's 2% or so who you could say not required. But when you go as hard as they have and just treat it with kind of disregard, that hurts people, hurts the economy, doesn't go well. And so I would not be surprised if in the next couple months, and certainly it seems like the election's coming in May rather than April, I would suggest that the government is going to be doing all it can to link Trump and Dutton together with these cuts. And certainly given that people like Michaelia Cash have sort of said you're going to get Trump-style government from Peter Dutton, that's not helping their cause on that score. So, but it is, I think, just an interesting live sort of example of what happens. Because mostly when we have governments talk about, we need to practice austerity, they kind of talk it and don't really do it because they know, do we really want to cut veterans payments? Do we really want to cut essential services, especially for voters?
Yep.
Generally they don't. And so they just go through and cut spending on foreign aid. They cut spending on museums, and they tinker kind of a bit around the edges. You don't generally be so stupid as to do what Musk is doing and just cutting everything, because the economy crashes and people's lives are much worse. And that is why certainly we here at the Australian Institute say public service, good. It's a good thing. Governments should do things. Governments can help. Governments are actually pretty good. And we often push back on this notion of, private sector better, public service worse. Nah. A lot of examples we see, public service actually probably should be doing more. And I think this is just a great example of how good and how vital government actually is, and why we should really be pushing for better from government, not less.
I think that's a great message to end on there, Greg.
Really is. And thank you, everyone, for listening. We really appreciate you listening. It's why we do it. We try to hopefully give you some information that you can take out and actually feel like you understand a bit more what's going on in this weird, wacky economy. We will be back with another Dollars and Cents next week. And Elinor, house prices.
Yay!
I'm sorry.
Insert air horns here, please, Angus.
We've got some new house price data coming out next week. There might also be some stuff about strikes and industrial disputes. There's always data around, so we'll be all over that. This episode, though, of Dollars and Cents was recorded on the 6th of March, and some things may have changed. My column, which has a lot of graphs on what's going on with the GDP figures, you can find that at Guardian Australia side on my Grogonomics column. But for all other research on what's going on with the economy, what's going on with society, why public spending is so important, go to our website, which is at australiainstitute.org.au. And also, please subscribe to our newsletter, which comes out every fortnight, has Amy Ramikas's excellent column that she gets a few things off her chest and she does it extremely well. So please subscribe to that. You really are missing out if you're not on it. Remember as well, we always appreciate feedback. So if you've got any questions you'd like to ask us, flick them to us at podcasts@australiainstitute.org.au. Our wonderful producer Angus will be all over them. Our music, as always, is by Blue Dot Sessions. Everyone, have a great week, and we'll see you all next week.
See ya.